Um, there we go. So we are
Hi,
live. Okay.
Justin.
Hi, Tim. How are you? So, evening, everyone. As I mentioned, apologies as there are a few people a few people have sent their apologies and apologies on my voice. It's starting to break. It does sometimes do that in the evenings. Oh, there we go. There we go. There we go. Hello,
Didn't know
everyone.
you were that young.
Something like that. Yeah, exactly. So if I can ask you to please mute, cameras on is welcome, but if you can mute just to avoid background noise. Um, so tonight we have Andre Brummer, who will be talking about social housing, but focusing specifically on specialized supported living. For full transparency, Andre is my business partner on the property side of our business. We worked together for a very long time. He might say too long. 10 years. We've just passed our 10-year anniversary, Andre. It was earlier this year, I think. Yeah.
I
2015.
think it's longer than that, dude.
Yeah, might be. Anyway, you see, like a married couple. So yeah, Andre will give you a sort of brief overview of where we come from, where we and where we are now, and he'll be speaking specifically to um, specialized supported living. So Andre, I don't know if you want to share your screen, and let's make sure that's
Cool.
all functioning. I think we did test it before.
Let's go.
Drop
Right.
that in. Oh, there we go. I've got. I panicked because it hit 8 o'clock and nobody was there, and I thought, "Oh my god, the link's not working or something's happened." And then everyone slowly came in. There we go. So yeah, you're showing the whole slide deck.
Luke, I'm just asked you please to go
Yeah.
and
Okay.
Let's. All right. So I think if you hit probably presenter view or full screen it or something, Andre.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect, brother. Okay. Over to you, my man. I will let you carry on from here. So how we'll do this, sorry, just before you start, is we'll Andre run through any questions as he's going. Drop them in the chat. But we'll probably pick them up as we're going through or towards the end. Otherwise, it just ends up we fill up the whole hour just on the presentation. So we'll focus on the presentation for in the region of 20 minutes, and then we'll get into the Q&A. But as you're going, just so you've noted the question, please do drop it in the chat, either to me privately or just the open chat. All right, cool. Thanks, Andre. Over to you.
Oh, hi there. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be presenting here tonight. Hopefully, everyone can understand me with my nice dulcet South African tones. I'm sure everyone appreciates that. No mention of the weekend at all. So, today, what I'll be going through our agenda today is a quick introduction to me and my background. Give you an overview of what you can do in social housing, but also specifically diving into the specific areas that we work in, which is specialized supported housing. We'll also run through some of the myths and definitions, quick run on demand, the required structure, the advantages and the process that we go through, and then also getting started and some financial considerations. So a quick little whirlwind run through what's quite an in-depth area and can be quite confusing. So, right. So a bit about me. I'm originally from South Africa. I lived in Australia for 7 years and moved to the UK, for which was planned to be a 2-year working holiday maker visa. And that was all of about 19 years ago. So something to do with 5 airports and itchy feet and hands and that kind of thing. Something that sort of stuck with me here. I'm a chartered mechanical engineer, qualified project manager for heavy construction, which I don't do anymore and I definitely do not miss, and also an architectural designer. I did some property investment courses in 2013, paid thousands just to find out that I couldn't even buy a property because I wasn't even a citizen. So after I finally got out of the fetal position and sort of picked myself up and went, duh, that was a silly idea. Got myself a mentor, some citizenship. And then since then, started off with rent to rent and then met Justin. And since then, it's been HMOs, buy-to-lets, flips, and recently we're into sort of developments now too. We were introduced by accident into social housing because one of the areas that we're investing in, someone else gave their property over to a social housing provider, and that sort of got us interested. Fortunately, we did our due diligence and we avoided that bullet because it turned out to be a nightmare for that person. So, started our journey, adventure into the rabbit warren, which is social housing. Quickly about me, got a couple of different business. So JSA Investment Group is our property holding company. Got GrowWise, which is our property consulting company specializing helping developers and investors set up specialized supported housing projects. We've got Northern Calling, a property holding company for sort of quasi-serviced accommodation properties. And then Extension Design Drawings, which is my planning, construction, and building reg drawings for basic extensions, pretty down south over here. As far as our business is now, we used to be up in the northwest. We're now mainly just focusing on the southern half of the UK. So that gives a bit of a quick whirlwind background of where we're at. Right, so what you can see on your screen is the rabbit warren, as far as I can go, where all the different areas of specialized or social housing is. Now, as you can see, there's a whole vast majority over there, but for this presentation in particular, I'm just going to be focusing on the specialized supported housing. And there is basically within the specialized or the supported housing realm, there's two main areas. As I said at the bottom, I'm sure I've missed some areas, and wherever else it is, I'm sure I missed quite a few of the rabbit warren areas. But basically, you've got two rough areas in the specialized supported housing arena. You've got specialized supported housing. Sorry, I got that wrong. In the supported housing arena, you've got the specialized supported housing side, and in the red, the intensive housing management side. And I'll delve into the difference in those a bit later. But as a broad overview, providing housing for people with learning disability, autism, mental health, physical disabilities. ABI stands for acquired brain injury. Children in care and adolescent care broadly falls under your specialized supported housing arena, whereas asylum seekers, parent and baby, drug rehabilitation, domestic violence victims, homeless and prison leavers and veterans, they all fall under the intensive housing management area. Our particular focus, myself and Justin, and where we particularly tend to work is the specialized supported housing area. However, as we've been going along, it's been sort of apparent to us that there are a couple of key areas in intensive housing management that we're now looking into. Okay. Right. So, here we go. A couple of myths. So, at this very moment, I'm sure everyone out there, you're hearing it all the time. Supported living, assistive living, these are currently the big buzz out there, all right? And myself and Justin, we've been doing this for the best part of 5 years now, and we're probably only just really on top of it now. 90% of people, without a shadow of a doubt, who I speak to, who think they're doing supported living, don't really have a clue about what they're doing, nor the consequences. There's some quite dire consequences if you get this wrong. Some serious things, So there's also many bad actors in the area. If you've got a bit of time on your side, go look up Citygate, MySpace. There was a mob called Supported Living Exchange, but they were intending doing good stuff. They just got it totally wrong. Sourcing agents, estate agents, and rent-to-rent operators, all trying to put this out there as a absolute golden bullet. They don't know what they're doing. So beware. This is actually quite a complex area. There's a lot of moving parts over and above the standard stuff that you will have to deal with property. So hopefully this presentation will give you some guidance how to set up some secure, reliable, and clear options, but something you need to know before you get any further, because everything else will not make sense in this arena, nor in my presentation. So let's do a quick definition run. Supported living. Basically, there's an element of care required for people to live as independently as possible. Assisted living and extra care tend to be typically an element of care required for older people to live independently. Supported accommodation, typically care and support for children. Your service users and your residents, these are the people receiving care and accommodation. If you were to go out there and speak to people, if you spoke about tenants, they probably wouldn't understand what you're speaking about. Service users and residents are typically what gets referred to as a very respectful means of the people that are receiving the service and are in the tenancy. CP is short for care providers, and these are the organizations that typically provide the care and support for the users to live as independently as possible. The RP, which are your registered providers or your registered social landlords, these are typically housing associations. And then the last key item here that will become apparent later, there's a thing called enhanced housing benefit, also known as exempt rent. So this is rent payments that are not capped at the LHA rate. And that's important, but I'll delve into that in a second. So the key areas that we specialize in, specifically specialized supported housing, we summarize it below. The difference between it, you got your tenant cohorts. So on the one side, you got your homeless, drug violence, that one. And on specialized supported housing, you've got learning disabilities, autism, and that kind of thing. In terms of rental income, right, your rent for the intensive housing management is typically LHA plus 10 or 20%. Whereas your specialized supported housing qualifies for key rent, and there are a couple of key criteria that need to be ticked to qualify for that. And the rent is also CPI linked. The housing element of it, one provider will do the housing and support. So either a care provider or housing association can provide both the care and support when it's for the intensive housing. For the intensive housing, like typically, it's only typically around about 5 hours a week. And the focus of the support is mainly around maintaining a tenancy with some basic support functions. The council support is not usually commissioned, but it's still worth getting some engagement from the council so that they know that it's happening. So that's also quite important. And your lease lengths are typically 3 to just under 7 years. And the 7 years, their cap is usually to avoid stamp duty land tax on the lease. And then the lease type is also just your day-to-day repairing lease. So not as good as the other one. When it comes to specialized supported housing, the government really mandates that the care element and the housing element are provided by separate companies. And this has become very apparent because basically in Birmingham, in the Wild West, there were a lot of bad operators over there that were both the housing operator and the care provider, and they weren't doing any services particularly well. And it created an issue for the people that were receiving the service and also the government trying to govern them, in that they couldn't oust these people because they were both sides of the fence. Whereas if they separated, if the landlord's not doing their part with the house, that person can get ousted. Or if the care provider is doing a bad job, you can swap the care provider out without having to move the tenant. So it's a bit of a safety net to make sure that people do what they're supposed to be doing and providing the service to the vulnerable people that they're supposed to be doing it for. The care and support will be a separate CQC, registered care provider, delivering support for typically minimum 20 hours per week. That's usually one of the tests for exempt status, 20 or 25 hours. Whilst I'm speaking about exempt status, one of the other things, you have to make particular modifications to the property that is specific for the individuals involved. So just lick of paint and maybe a new front door is not going to pass for this one. You know, they will need more items if you want to get the exempt rent. The council support, this is commissioned by the council commissioners or NHS commissioners, and they will give you written support for it. And that's very important because it means that they will follow through providing you deliver the property. So it means you will get a tenant or tenants in the case of what we're doing down south, which is 14 units of accommodation, all single bed flats. And then finally, typically these kind of supported housing, specialized supported housing, you've got 10 to 20 year leases with limited or no break clauses. We personally prefer no break clauses, especially if it's with a very good RP, registered provider, that's got good standing, and then which then in turn creates a very strong covenant, and hence your back-end valuation will be very strong too. So there's a couple of bits and pieces. And the other thing with these leases, they're fully repaired and insured leases. Okay, they have to hand the property back to you in the same condition as what you gave it to them. Whereas the other one, your day-to-day repairing, is still under dilapidations, etc. You know. All right. So what's the demand here? And this is specifically, the site is just for learning disability and autism because this is our specialist area. But the big number, what I'll just point out there is there's 1.5 million people with learning disability in the UK, and 1 in 100 people in the UK have autism. So if you do the maths there, there's quite a few people that's probably going to need accommodation. And the rest of that's on that slide just backs it up. So there's a lot of people that are in hospital that shouldn't be in hospital just because there's no place for them to go to. So they're getting blocked in there. So they're in big institutions where it's just not the right setting for them. Okay. So where a lot of people get this wrong is they don't set it up properly. They hear the nice buzzword of supported housing and they go, right, let's go find a care provider. And they typically find themselves a care provider that's maybe been in business for a year, maybe two, potentially haven't even got a service up and running. And Mr. Hero Landlord comes in and runs in and gives them a property, leasing directly to the care provider. And then all sorts of shenanigans unrolls from there because they can't afford the rent that they've promised, and then everything goes wrong. So the proper way to set this up is you need the commissioner support, and the commissioner will give an agreement for care provision to the care provider. All right. Between the registered provider and the care provider, there'll be a service level agreement. So that's how they interact, and it says what they need to provide. The registered provider is responsible for providing all the maintenance and dealing with leases with the service users. That's their key item, right? Whereas the care provider provides care, and you as the investor will provide a house as part of that over there. Now, your rents will come directly from the Department of Workplace and Pensions to housing benefits and then directly to the registered provider. It does not come via their local authority. And that's important because many people that have done social housing in the past, your standard social housing where you get your LHA rent. When the council runs out of money, who's the first people that don't get paid? Hands up, anyone? Who's the first people that don't get paid? No? Any guesses? Any guesses? Landlords. Those are the first people that don't get paid. So you could have a couple of months where you don't get paid and then suddenly all your arrears get paid. And over that time, you somehow need to keep paying the bill, right? So hence why I like this system, because local councils don't get a hand in our rent. So the rent passes down to the registered provider. They then pay it as lease income to yourself as the investor, as the superior landlord in this instance. Cool. But that's very, very important. A lot of people miss out the registered provider. And there's another part about the registered provider. Only registered providers can claim the exempt rent. No one else. So there's a main reason for keeping a registered provider in there. I mean, back in the day when Justin and myself were busy looking into this, and we actually thought, right, well, why do we need another party of this? Why don't we become the registered provider? And we did our due diligence, and Lassen's laughing there. Oh, so am I, actually. And we found out that we don't want to be registered providers. They're downright pain in the arse. They're highly regulated, and it'll take you probably a couple of years to set up and get registered, recognized by the authorities. And anyway, at this moment, the authorities aren't accepting any more registered providers whilst they deal with the Cowboys in Birmingham. So there you have it. So you have to deal with registered providers, and there's some really good ones out there. So don't worry about it. They'll do their job. We provide houses. All right. So there's a lot of advantages. In particular, this slide is more sort of dealing with specialized supported housing. You got your stable inflation-linked income via leases, ranging between 5 and 20 years. You can have a shorter length if you want to in specialized supported housing. Not sure why you would. Your local government support for each commission scheme. So that is worth a lot, okay? There's a lot of people that are going guaranteed rent, government backed, and all the rest of it, but they haven't actually got the right support paper. They haven't got housing benefit approval. They haven't got a registered provider. That ticket that they're speaking about is worth zero. It's not got any value whatsoever. Okay. Rents, as I said, approved by housing benefits and goes via the housing association. All bills are covered by the registered provider, including council tax and utilities. What you've got is consistent rent with a fully repaired and investments with, hell no, let's try that again. Consistent rents received with fully repaired and insured FRI investment grade leases, all right? Investment grade leases means that institutions would like to buy this, all right? There are funds, pension funds, that this is a very, very good exit or a very good asset to have, especially if it's a long-term asset that's constantly increasing. So there's an additional exit there, all right? We've unfortunately have gone through a little dip over the last couple of years. The likes of the Triple Points and the Civitases and a couple of other ones have sort of stopped buying for a little bit with all the jitters with the government and all the rest of it, but they're slowly coming back again. So hopefully that'll be as another exit in due course. We haven't sold one of our items to one of these individuals, these funds yet. So for us, it's something that we're certainly still working on, but I'm sure we'll get there in due course. The tenants are typically there for long term. Learning disability and autism, guys, they don't like change. They like consistency. They like to know where they're going. And if they're happy in a position, then there's no real reason for them to move. So, and what we like to do is provide really good quality facilities so that once again, they don't want to move. You know, we don't want our tenants to move, but for the right reasons, because they don't want to move. They're happy where they are. Okay. All right. So there's a process that we follow over here. So first, you need to identify your demand from local authorities, care partners, housing associations, and then find properties to meet that demand. Now, that would be the right way to do it. We've been in this industry for quite some time. Sometimes we just get approached, but that's because we've been in it for a while. After that, firstly, we secure council support and housing benefit support for the right properties, right? Because we don't want to invest in a property that doesn't have the right exit. And once we've done those items, we can then sign an agreement for lease, which then the agreement for lease, basically you can have that property valued if you haven't even done the building or the refurbishment or whatever it is at the moment. At that point, you know what your end value is going to be. And at that point, we'll then refurbish and build in line with our partner specification. Once that's done and all parties are happy with what's been done, we'll sign the lease with the housing association on practical completion. And then we can either hold the asset on a long-term lease or to refinance, sell to an investment fund, or sell to a high-net individual. At the moment, we like holding on to it because these are great assets. All right. Now, getting started. How many of these do I have? There we go. Okay. How am I doing for time, Justin?
We're about 25 minutes and I can see people are like, don't worry, it's recorded, everyone. It's on the school platform. You can go back and chunk it down. This is a mind dump. But yeah, another sort of 5 or so minutes, but I think you're nearly at the end anyway.
Sure. I won't go quite through all of this, but well, as it is, we've been doing this for 5 years straight, and we only, every day is a learning day. And so, yeah, first time we came across this, it takes a while to navigate this. So if you think you're getting started in this, first decide which specialist area you want to get into. Is it homelessness, autism? Which is the area you want to get into? Because you can't hit all of them. Take it from me. You cannot hit all of them. You'll never get anywhere with it. There's just not enough time in the day. Then what you need to do is contact care providers. Ideally, you'd go straight to the council and go, right here, hey, Mr. Commissioner, what do you want and where do you want it? Sadly, it doesn't work that way. You could contact the council, and if you actually get hold of the commissioner, you'll probably be the thousandth call they've received from the property investor, and they'll just go, blah. Send me an email, and you'll never hear of them again, and they'll never pick up the phone again. So go via the care providers. Work with them to find a property and take it to the commissioners. How do you find your care providers, or how do you get where you want to be? Search LinkedIn or CQC for either supported living, care provider, and all those other terms that are down there. Okay. Do your due diligence on your potential providers. They've got deep standing records, good expertise, good local relationships. And in this industry, you can ask for proof of that. We ask for proof from everyone we deal with, and they happily give it because they know we're doing things properly. Make sure they experience well resources and that they're financially robust. And the best way to call care providers is by calling them, and you just need to explain precisely what you want to achieve and how you can help. You need to be honest, patient, and persistent. It's going to take a number of attempts. There was a point where I was probably making about 50 calls a week, and of those, probably about 10 a week would go through and I'd get to speak to the right person. But it'd be follow up. And having a small one-page document or 5-slide presentation to follow up your call if requested, but always follow up with calls, all right? Emails go nowhere. it's building that relationship. If you probably have heard this many a time before, property is a relationship game. Here, it's all about the relationship. It's all about building that, and it's even more so. So it's going to take time to build those relationships. All right. So there's a couple of hidden costs in this over here that people don't realize. And once again, this is where people really come unstuck. So they think they're nailing it, but then they get caught out with costs that they did not factor into their calculations, and it basically kills the deal for them. All right. So the RP charges a fee upfront. All right. Onboarding, usually after you've signed your lease, they'll want that. And it's typically 3 to 4 months rent that they want. Okay. Then, because these are commercial contracts, it's quite normal that you've got a rent-free period. So this is to allow your care providers to move people in there, get everyone set up, and make sure they're all right. This is similar to what you would have if you owned a shop. There'd be a rent-free period for people to set themselves up. Now, that rent-free period can be paid up front. So you'll have to pay that to the RP, or you can make it a contractual rent-free period where you just don't receive the rent for the agreed period of time. Now, the difference between the one is you typically capitalize the rent. So if you're going to sell the property, if you're going to sell the deal, contractual, you do it that way if you're going to hold on to it, because you don't want to be unnecessarily incurring interest on those capitalized fees that you paid up front. There's also a fee to manage the rent-free period, which is a nice one. Typically, it's a service charge, £75 per week per unit, times by the rent-free period in weeks. All right. You'll have to do a market rent valuation, another 1,250. And then the legal costs, this is a biggie. Because you're dealing with these are very specialist solicitors that you're dealing with in this instance. Typically, just for a lease on its own, it's going to be £7,000 plus VAT. If you want to do the agreement for lease 2, plus the lease, that'll be £14,000 plus VAT. And then there's also stamp duty payable if you've got leases over 7 years. So, not for the faint-hearted, unfortunately, but well worthwhile. So, ultimately, we're property investors, and we're in it, for ourselves, but we also want to make an impact. So, Justin and myself, after we set up our portfolio up in the Northwest, we got to a point where we're like, okay, right, we need to do something that's going to leave a bit of a legacy, that's going to, not just make us profit, but actually do good too. And so that's how we got to that. And that's what's really important to us. All right. So how can we work together? So consultancy that we spoke about previous, GrowWise, we work with existing developers to deliver these schemes. These are good developers that already have got pipelines, and we add an additional level of value to these. You can lend to us, so it is short-term finance. We typically at 1% per month, and then long-term finance at just under 6% per month. 6% per annum. Per annum. If only per month.
Yeah.
Gee, I would be absolutely sitting on a nice beach. Introductions, we pay commissions on deals that we close. So if you bring us a deal or introduce us to something like that and we close it, then we're happy to pay commissions. If you've got a property that you want to source to us, we're happy to take those. And of course, for me, architectural designs, I do the designs, planning drawings, build regulation drawings, and specifications. So there's quite a bit there if you're interested. And lastly, if you want to connect, those are my details. Catch me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or just give me a yell.
Thanks, Andre.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Look, obviously that's it's a big subject and it's a complex subject, and we were condensing, well, both of us working for 5 years, so 10 years worth of effort of work into like 20 minutes. So yeah, I mean, it's a deeply complex subject. A lot of us have spoken. I'm a coach for quite a few of you. A lot of us have spoken about social housing. This is probably, I don't know if you'd agree with me, Andre, this is probably like the most extreme or sort of most complex end of social housing, maybe. If we pull it back to sort of the homelessness, the drug and alcohol abuse, those sort of things, those are much easier to get into as a starting point, but the principles are exactly the same. So yeah, I mean, as Andre says, unfortunately, there's a lot of nefarious actors out there. They seem to be flashing them out, but there'll always be people, promising. I know some of us have had these discussions, oh, have you seen this deal? It looks amazing. And once we start digging down a little bit, we start to see that in actual fact, those numbers aren't correct. And yeah, they've just, well, in some cases are just blatantly made up. So yeah, this is obviously recorded. So please do go back on the school platform under the subject matter expert tab in the classroom, and you'll be able to go back, review, take it slow, and go through sort of slide by slide and digest the information as you will. So are there any questions? Are there any questions broadly around this? We haven't talked about lending. And to give you an example, one of the, when we talk, as Andre mentioned, the subsets or the sort of specialist areas. I don't know how many of you were at our last in-person event. Then where were we? Knightsbridge. And Gareth had his clients along there, which is not a PLN client. It's a Interlife client who specializes in children's homes. And that's all he does. And we had a conversation, and it's not, a lot of what he was telling me was new information. We're both in social housing, just in slightly different niches. And, it's a totally different game, because we obviously don't look at social housing. So, so question there was what sort of entry-level capital would be required, and the deal values. So, Stefan, and Andre, I don't know if you want to jump in here. It depends on what size you are doing. For us, the minimum is 4 units. So you're effectively putting up or establishing 4 units. So that obviously depends on the property price where you're looking. Central London's going to be very different to Manchester's going to be very different to Edinburgh, kind of thing. So yeah, it depends on, it's the property price. In terms of refurb, if I had to put a rough number, Andre, would you say 30% above standard refurb costs? Would that be a reasonable?
I mean, that's indicative, but it's variable really, because even within, like, for example, providing for an autistic person, it could be your sort of basic refurb line. This could be person that, for example, does have violent spells to them, so they might have 3-to-1 care personnel to them. So instead of, when you put up that stud wall, that's going to have to be like OSB line stud wall. So when they hit it, like, the plaster will come off, but they'll just quickly plaster over it. You're not going to have to do a lot more work than that, Wow, at the top end, and we currently don't do this, is anti-ligature for people that, to stop people hanging themselves. And give you an idea, one window for one of those will set you back $7,000 a pop. So, sorry, guys.
Don't do that. Don't look at anti-ligature.
We had a property where the anti-ligature was going to be 70,000. We said, no, thank you. That's crazy.
But I mean, that was 70,000 on what was that, £150,000 house or something. Yeah, just stay away from that sort of sharp end. But yeah, it is variable, as Andre said. they may
It's a
want.
bit hard, you know.
Yeah.
It's you know the yeah, it is tricky. It really comes down to the individuals that you're catering for. You know, the 14 units that we're doing down south at the moment, those are your lower level needs. They're your sort of 20-hour pluses. So, that'd be more a standard sort of refurb cost for those units. Whereas, what we're looking at now is, 3-to-1 care needs, so they need to be a lot more robust. So there's different sort of things that need to come in there. No sharp corners. You have to round corners on edges. So sort of change your house design a little bit. To some individuals, the care providers need 2 exits from each room so that if there's a problem, they've got a way out.
Staff can get out.
So, it's specific to need.
But yeah, I
But
mean,
that's our experience in specialized supported housing. Whereas once you're in your intensive housing management area, that's a lot more easier to control. That's much more your standard refurb cost, your standard sort of kind of thing. And that, think of it now, Justin. I mean, if we were doing this again now, that's probably where we would have probably started.
Absolutely.
Got to know that a lot better because it's much faster, a lot further throughput, and they're good and solid, Whereas there's a lot more for specialized supported housing. There's a lot more moving parts.
Yeah, so those of you that are dealing with Fraser, one of our recommended sourcing agents, that's what he's effectively doing. Well, not him. That's what he's putting you together with the provider for intensive housing management. So Fraser Andre works with Instead. So
sure.
so that's intensive housing management, and the value in those sort of, I call them entry-level social housing, is you get a lot of the benefits of social housing, of specialized supported living, lease income, potentially CPI linked, etc., without this capital cost, Stefan, that you'd have to put into a property. So it can vary. I think where Andre made the point, and I'll reiterate the point, where a lot of investors get caught out when it gets to anything where there's a high degree of care needed, is they get caught out both on the contract costs. This is not just buy a house, get a higher refurb, and then get a lease in place. There's all the lease costs and creating that lease. That's where they get caught out. And then yes, sometimes on the physical refurb, where there's the expectations just aren't aligned with what is needed from the care provider. Cool. Any other questions that anybody wants to dive onto? No, everyone's stunned in silence. Not.
That'd be a first one. Gee.
That'd be a first one, yeah.
I couldn't have answered everyone's questions, however, I just absolutely stunned everyone.
Yeah, it's too late. Everyone should have had a coffee and not a tea.
I've got another question, Justin and Andre. Thanks for this, Andre. Is this something that works only in really big cities, or would even smaller cities be opportunities for this?
Excuse me just for a sec. Got to let the cat in.
Yeah. So to answer that question, no, it works. It works anyway. But the caveat in that, okay, and one thing we haven't really touched on here is when you are dealing with particularly a care provider, one of their big motivating factors is staff. Staff both enable in the ability to get staff and to get staff on site. So you would want to have like we look at a location not too far from where I live down in Hampshire, and there's quite a few challenges on that site, but one of the biggest challenges is probably going to be transport. Now, look, it doesn't, a lot of these staff do drive, but, one of the requirements might be having, ideally near a reasonably mainline bus route or train station. But no, you can have it anywhere. It's a demand-led model, so it's what do they want and where do they want it. That being said, and Andre will back me up here, once you start to get on this rabbit hole, there is a massive need for semi-rural properties. two specific service users classes, which is kids. Is it over 13 or over 16, Andre? But like kids that are in care that maybe have slightly more violent tendencies or whatever, so they put them in a semi-rural location just to try and bring the tone about, take them away from temptation, etc. And then what was the other one? My brain's gone now. That I was thinking of when I said that, semi-rural locations. People with very high acuity, in other words, very high care needs. That they can also, there is quite a big demand for that. But those are niche. Those are like one house in a specific place for a specific person. So it's, as Andre said,
Because some of the people make a lot of noise, like they'll go out and shout, 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 shout. And it's not that they mean any malice, it's just they got to shout. And put that next to neighbours, eventually it's going to start causing trouble. So something like that needs a bit more of a semi-rural. But it's also a bit of a toss-up too. Like for us, as I said, we want to make our homes very desirable. And part of that is also access to amenities. So that's where, where care providers say, listen, we're semi-rural and so on. We have to speak to them. So, okay, well, what do you mean by semi-rural? And what's the trade-off with, having transport for these individuals, and how independent do we really want them to be? So with us, we typically look and make sure that there is a bus route close by, that there can actually be as much independence as possible, so that the staff also have got an alternate option to get there if they don't want to drive. So it is basically, to phrase the question, you can be anywhere. For us, we sort of, we're still in negotiation. We're speaking to people about the semi-rural thing. We want to get a bit more of a definition of what that is, because you don't want to go invest in something in the middle of nowhere, and then what are you going to do with it?
What happens after?
It's, that's a bit of a mistake. So there's a lot of factors to consider. But
so Stefan,
in theory, you can go anywhere, but more towns, that kind of thing, so that people can integrate in the community, that kind of thing is definitely more preferred. Does that help, Stefan?
Yes. No, that's helpful.
So the deal that you've just done, Stefan, and the setup that you've got, that's intensive housing management. That falls under.
If I look on that chart that Andre showed right in the beginning, I'm renting out to a housing association. So my assumption is, it's on the left-hand side.
Yeah, but I mean, for the purposes of this, I know the structure of the deal that you've done, that would fall under intensive housing management.
Who's your end service user, Stefan?
Target Housing.
Target Housing. Oh, okay, right.
Homelessness.
Yeah, okay. I know them. We know them.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, I've got multiple things open.
So that'd be your intensive housing management, LHA plus 10 or 20%.
Yeah, the rent's about 10% higher than the maximum I could figure out you would get on a short-term lease.
An AST, yeah.
On an AST, on normal lease, I mean.
Yeah.
In terms of your, if you take a market value house, and meaning if you're unable to, I'm trying to find out what's roughly the returns you can get on these. And I know that's a really broad question, because it depends where you buy initially or whatever, but rated according to a standard
type calculation.
Just normal valuation.
I see what you mean. You mean the refinance value. What's your
return if you refinance based on the cash left in the deal, roughly? I mean, I guess it's very broad and depends, but you have because what you're saying is that SSH or what
Yeah.
that one? The rent is market related. It doesn't say it's 10% above LHA.
No, it's not market related at all.
Okay.
So intensive housing management is LHA. It'll be LHA plus 20%, plus 10%, plus 25, whatever is agreed between the council and the housing association. When it comes to supported living, sorry, Andrea, I hope you don't mind. When it comes to supported living, they use, so I suppose an easy way to explain this, imagine somebody has a child, they then, obviously a child grows up, the child has challenges, they then go to the council, council goes, we can't, the only thing we can give you is local housing allowance. That's all they can, that's all they are able to do. What then happens is that obviously, you know, the parents say, well, I can't take care of this kid. And they then become part of the NHS system. So that's kind of a very, very rough sort of life, flow of how they get to where they are. So in order to combat that, in order to make that more feasible, the Housing Association is able to claim exempt rent, which is, they use LHA as a baseline, but they don't look at it and go, it's LHA plus a percentage. The care provider and the housing association will basically say, to take care of this person will cost this much per week, if I'm being very blunt. And that cost can then get, because it's exempt rent, which doesn't fall under the financing acts or whatever of the council, it then gets paid by central government. Does that make sense?
So the care provision comes through the council, and that gets paid to the council.
Yeah.
Okay. The rent, the exempt rent item there, is, that's negotiable, you know, because there's a form that you need to be able to fill in and that kind of thing, and you need to understand it and how it works, and you need to set out, and it's a means of justifying the rent that you're charging. Now, housing associations will be a bit wary. You know, you can push market rent a bit more higher, but you still have to justify why you're charging this rent. Okay. So it is negotiable, and if you can substantiate it, then more than likely you'd be able to get it.
Yeah.
But it's another tricky area in this council, or in this arena, because you could be speaking to council going, okay, right, I've got this over here. And this definitely happened to us early doors, where we'd go, so what kind of rent are we looking at? And they'd go, no, well, you tell us. You're like, well, okay, rightio. So we'd come back to them with a rent, and they'd go, absolutely not. That's crazy. We can only do 600. Why don't you just tell us that from the word go? Because then we wouldn't even wasted our time. We'd just said goodbye at that point. You know? So it's a chicken and egg sometimes, this one, but we know a way around it. We've been through it a couple of times now, so we know a way through it.
Yeah, from a returns perspective, Stefan, it's from an ROI perspective, it's roughly the same as private rented sector, but what you got to factor in there is there are no voids. There is no management from your side. You know, if you take let's say a block of flats versus a block of flats that's handed over to to specialized supported living, your time commitment is vastly less. You're upfront a lot more, but ongoing a lot less. You know, we are talking, you know, you get a remittance statement, rent gets paid every month, happy days. And then occasional, you know, maybe a maintenance issue or something like that. So your commitment from a time perspective is vastly less ongoing. So, but over, you know, those returns will start to creep up, because obviously you've got the inflation linked rent. From how much are the properties worth? So big developments, they'll do just on a yield basis. You work out your value of the development at a 7% yield. Whatever your gross rent is that you receive per year, divided by 7% will give you a yield figure, will give you the value of that development. Individual houses, yeah, we're working on, getting an understanding of whether we can do individual houses on a commercial valuation as opposed to on a yield valuation, a commercial valuation, as opposed to just a bricks and mortar. The issue there is probably not getting the valuation more than the lending itself. So the model that we are, and this is something that we've been working on quite intensively for the last sort of 2-3 months. The model that we look at is basically getting a number of houses and creating a single loan facility across multiple properties, and that then creates the same thing as in 6, 7, 4 houses, whatever the case may be. Does that make sense? Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. So doing an individual house is not really possible because you can't get the commercial.
It is. I mean, you can. You absolutely can. You can buy a house.
Valuation.
Yeah, I know. From a valuation, you probably look at bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess my understanding is the reason why you guys do it, or why it's recommended, is because it's a long-term, stable income, no voids, no risk, or very low risk.
Very low risk. Yeah.
Yeah. The other,
all the risk really is up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Once you signed over and the people are in there, everyone's fixed in there. So providing you've got a good quality RP on board, housing association, that's got very deep pockets and, sticks to the regulations and does their job properly, it's solid,
So I guess that,
and even if there's a void, you'll get paid.
Yeah.
So I guess the trickiest thing is getting the housing association on board and knowing what they want and signing that lease in the first place.
Yeah.
And do you get guaranteed up front to some extent? If they need X, you found X minus 1, you add the 1, and then without adding the 1, do they sign the contract, or do you need to add 1 first and then they sign the contract?
I don't quite understand what you mean. Do you want to try that again, Stefan?
If they give you if you're able to provide what they want, how much he's asking about security of contract is basically what Stefan's asking. Yeah. So you can get a lot of that documentation. I'll let Andre talk about it, but you can get a lot of that documentation up front. The only you don't get a lease, you get an agreement for lease, which is still legally binding. But yeah, I mean, Andre, if you just want to talk to basically letter of support and then, then that sort of process.
Yeah, to your point, you can get upfront assurances in the form of an agreement for lease, and that sort of takes the form of providing, we've got an agreement between us that as long as you provide the property as has been agreed to the agreed specification, then we will lease it off you once it is done on these lease terms. So you can agree all that up front before you've even started works. And specifically for your bigger schemes, that's typically what you'd want to do. Whether or not it'd be worth it for like a little bungalow or smaller house to do an AFL, I'm not sure if it's entirely worth it at that point. But as long as you've done your due diligence and you've got commissioner support and got your care provider in place and all the rest of it, you're mitigating that anyway. So putting 14 grand plus VAT to do a AFL plus lease, might not work all that well. That you might just want the lease in that instance, but having done all the work around it to make sure that it happens. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks. I think also worth considering here is that I'm definitely not encouraging this, but I am going to say it because it does happen. It does boil down to your risk profile. Okay, if you wanted to just sign a direct lease with a care provider which, as Andre very rightly mentioned, is where a lot of people get caught out. But you could do that, and you would make more than probably market rent. But you've got to think through the risk of that. It's what if that care provider goes under? You know, have you got the correct lending on the property? Have you got the correct insurance on the property? To me, it's not. To us, it's not something that we would do. But I know it happens a lot. Somebody goes, they get a buy-to-let product on a little house, and they lease it directly to a care provider. Yeah, but what you've got to be thinking of from an investor perspective is, I'm not sure if that's technically illegal. It's probably breaking mortgage terms and conditions. But what you've got to be thinking about is, what happens
fraud.
if they?
Straight.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, it'll be mortgage fraud, I suppose. But I mean, the point
mortgage
is
fraud and insurance fraud.
Insurance fraud.
You
Yeah.
know, you do that, you're blacklisted. Say goodbye to your property career.
Yeah. But I mean, the
No
point,
lenders will lend to you.
your biggest risk there is your care provider going under, and then you're sitting there going, "Uh-oh, what do I do?" Because what lender's going to come along and evict four, people that need support, 3-4 people that need support?
So put it this way, the law protects vulnerable people.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the risk area over here that people don't realize, that the law protects vulnerable people. So it's very hard to evict vulnerable people. So if you haven't set this up properly and you're not dealing with the proper housing association, got the right legal backs behind them, and they do it all by the book, you could be dealing with a two-bit care provider that was doing a good job and they go under. Now you're stuck with a vulnerable tenant that you are not going to be able to evict. Game over. So it's not just, okay, let's go put it onto the open market again. Not happening. You're stuck.
Yeah, for a while.
So that's why you need the right people in at the right point, that can take care of the situation and have got the financial backing to pay your voids, or pay it if something goes wrong there, and get someone else in. So that's
Cool.
just something to care. Another thing, but it also works both ways, by the way, just out of curiosity. That's another reason also why we like doing what we're doing, because it's, essentially, it's illegal to make a vulnerable person, evict a vulnerable person. So basically, if the government don't pay the rents, they are breaking the law, and they will never want to be seen to be doing that, because they're going to cause themselves a major headache. So once again, your rent is very secure. So if you're doing it right,
this is actually a sector that is ring fenced in the new renters reform bill.
It is.
It's not. I don't think it's excluded from the conditions, but it has.
It's not. But there's some very
specifics.
Terms that only apply to this that's been brought up, that specifically for vulnerable people that are in this situation, that gives housing associations the ability to manage them. So, yes.
All right. Excellent. Well, everyone, I'm not sure if there's any final questions. Going once, going twice. Sold. No, I will let you all go and have a little lie down because of what you've just taken into your brain. But yeah, please reach out to Andre. Please reach out to myself. This is a sector that I think is a very powerful strategy. I think social housing in general is probably a strategy that a lot of you are looking at and should be looking at, just because the demand is so big. We were talking about one area within social housing, that wasn't homelessness, that wasn't any of the other subsets that we talked about. Andre, thank you so much for your time. Andre actually had to wing it this evening because his partner's out. So there was a bit of putting kids to bed and then making sure and hoping they stayed asleep. But we had a backup plan. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I hope that was that valuable. I mean, did you feel a little bit brighter, or maybe not so much around, now that you've sort of heard of what this is about? So yeah, thank you so much, Andre. We've got a big day tomorrow. We are hosting it. Yeah, we had a very important. We've managed to shoehorn ourselves into quite a snazzy. We shouldn't be in a conference that we will probably be at. Not allowed. But yeah, we'll be one of a few investors in a very big social housing conference. So looking forward to that tomorrow. Anyway, but thanks again, Andre. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And we hope to see you all soon. Any questions, reach out to us, school platform, via email, whatever the case may be. All right, super. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Pleasure, guys.
Thanks,
Take
Brisbane.
care.
Thanks, Andre.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.